So having had a Disability Discrimination Act for 25 years, are we now treating people with more respect and equality?
Well, Rose, I'm not trying to pigeonhole you here, but I mean, you're in a sense, you're the obvious person to answer it first. I know, I can't imagine. But give us the benefit of your experience.
So the Disability Act came in 1995. I was 5 years old, and without a doubt, my life has been better because of it. I had an education at a mainstream school. I went to university, I got a job, and with my cerebral palsy, I've been a successful and independent human being, and I am proud of who I am, and I can wee in disabled toilets and park where I want because of this groundbreaking Disability Act. Saying that, we're 25 years on, and whenever I walk in the street alone, I wear headphones because of how I walk and I talk. I get abuse on a daily basis. I am not alone in that. I am not alone in that. I have had times of unemployment. Unemployment is huge amongst disabled people. I tried to apply for jobs, and I have been hung up on because of how I speak. And I'm not alone, because right now 250,000 disabled people are unemployed, and because of COVID, that is rising. I was gonna say that disabled people are overlooked, but they're not. They are deliberately ignored because disabled people need more care and more money, and I don't feel like, as a disabled person, I am getting the care and support I need right now.
David?
Well, I mean, it's hard to follow that.
It is. I mean,
and that was very moving to listen to. Look, I suspect, of course, there's been progress over the last 25 years, but we've got a long way to go. And let me just say, I have 3 children, and one of them has got a special sort of educational needs, and I know the struggle of parents in this country when they're trying to get a statement. Of course, there's still huge discrimination in employment. I was thinking of the young black man dragged out of the Oxford Union, blind, just a year or so ago. I think that there's a lot to do in this country, and we probably have to return to the legislation that's required. If you look at that story of the 20th century, it's a lot of people at the beginning of that century, certainly the disabled, anyone with educational needs, black and brown people, women, working people, all oppressed in some ways, put down. and by the end of the 20th century beginning to get their rights. But we are still on that journey. And as we go into a deep recession, we know that the people who can be deeply affected are those with disabilities. And let me just say, if you defund local authorities like we have in this country, if you've got local authorities like Croydon, Northampton going bust, with budgets cut of 50%, where is the money for adult social care that the disabled depend on? Where is the money for the kit and equipment that people need in their homes? All the money being cut in day centres right across the country. So it's not a rosy picture. In some ways, it feels like a rolling back. And I endorse what's been said. Robin.
I mean, I think that the point is that in terms of either being overlooked or deliberately ignored is something that society continues to need to be challenged on. And disability comes in many shapes. Visible disability often leads to abuse, but also I'm very conscious one of my daughters has a chromosomal abnormality. She has no physical disability, but she's disadvantaged by a hidden disability. And I think that's also a problem, a hidden problem that people don't necessarily recognise. And I think it's so critical that individuals like yourself, Rosie, challenge the rest of society repeatedly. The fight needs to go on, and we can never be, relaxed and not challenge ourselves, whether it's disability or any type of prejudice.
Merryn.
I haven't much to add to that, to be honest, except for just to say that from what we hear, it's perfectly obvious that there are not that many families in the UK that aren't in some way touched by the difficulties of having someone with a disability inside their family. And obviously there's a lot more to be done to help everybody with that. But I would also say that we mustn't underestimate how far we've come over the last 25 years. I mean, everybody now understands, which I don't think they did then, that lack of access to transport, to buildings, to education, to employment, etc., was a travesty, and now is considered to be something that everyone should have access to. So there has been huge change over the last 25 years. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but we must remember how far we've come as well.
I mean, I was quite surprised to learn that rules on accessible public transport come into force for buses and coaches from the end of this year, which is obviously so many years after the Disability Discrimination Act. I mean, rail replacement buses, for example, 60% of them are not accessible. There's quite a few hands up. Emily.
Thank you. I just want to say applaud Rosie for challenging you all on that, but also I want to raise an issue that was just mentioned about SEN and children that are struggling in schools. The delays in diagnosis for neurodifferences at the moment is over 3 years in many areas, including Kent, and COVID is only going to increase that delay. The Disability Discrimination Act gave us the rights to education. There are lots of children that are not able to access education because they're still waiting for a diagnosis. What is going to be done about that?
Donna.
I think we need to remember that any one of us can become disabled at any point in time. So when we're supporting and increasing access for disabled people, we're actually supporting ourselves, we're supporting the entire country. So I think looking at this as issues that's just for disabled people is just, I don't think it's helpful. It's about how do we increase access for all of us, including disabled people. And that's how we should look at this.
Daniel?
Is it a matter of adding new legislation or becoming a less judgmental society?
Matt?
Well, I admire you so much, Rosie, for the way that you articulate this. And I thought what Emily said was so strong. In a small way, I am neurodiverse, I'm dyslexic. And it took me until I was 18 until I was diagnosed. And then I got the support I need, and it made an enormous difference to me. But I was lucky because I was essentially able to get by on my maths and despite the fact that my language skills were very poor, at my written language skills at school. So I've felt just a tiny bit of what that feels like. But I think that Daniel's point is just so important, which is, of course, legislation's important, and that is something we should always be pushing forward, like with the change of the buses at the end of this year. I didn't know about that. I think that's really important, but my God, how long has it taken us to get to this point? But it's also about society accepting everyone and looking for the good in everyone. You know, I think that everyone has something to contribute, and we need to go and it's our task, our mission is to go and find what is good in people and the contribution they can make, and bring it out and support people to do that. So I think there's a long way to go.
Rosie, we're almost out of time, but I just want to give you a final word on that.
I think I kicked myself without talking about the change between the DLA disability living allowance to the personal independence payment, because 650,000 disabled people, including myself, got caught, and that just makes me insanely angry. That I thought when I was assessed in 2008, that money that kept me going, that gave me support, it was taken off me. And luckily, I can work harder, I can push myself, but a lot of disabled people are now on the poverty line because they were assessed by a stranger for 10 minutes who would look at them and go, what do you need? That just makes my blood boil. And yeah, I want to end it by going, stop ignoring disabled people. We make up 22% of the population. We're here and we're worth listening to.
Rosie, look at that. If the people were here in this studio with us, you'd hear the applause. You can only see it.